Hey guys, tonight we're going back to a time when your alarm clock wasn't your phone but a rooster crowing from somewhere vaguely near your thatched roof. Except tonight, you're not even lucky enough to wait for the rooster. Nope, you're already awake. It's 3 a.m., pitch black, freezing, and you're a medieval baker. And yes, you're expected to be cheery about it. You're in a small village tucked somewhere in the rolling countryside of 14th century England, or maybe it's France. Honestly, you can't really tell. The architecture looks the same at this hour. The cobblestone streets are damp from yesterday's rain. Your breath fogs in the cold, and your feet are already regretting the decision to get out of bed. But here you are, trudging through darkness toward the stone bakery, half hoping a wolf doesn't jump out from the HEDGEROW. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing where in the world you're tuning in now. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slip through the bakery door, ducking to avoid the low lintel. The inside smells like yesterday's bread crusts, old ash, and the faint musk of damp cloth. It's quiet, save for the rustle of rats scurrying behind sacks of flour. You grope for the flint and steel on the shelf and crouch to strike a spark. After a few frustrating attempts, because nothing works on the first try when you're half asleep, you manage to coax a flicker of orange into the kindling. The fire stirs like it's waking up too, slowly gaining strength. Soon it'll be ablaze, but not yet. You throw on your apron, still crusted with yesterday's dough, like a relic from an ancient battle, and begin hauling sacks of flour into the light. Each one feels like it weighs more than you. You grunt. You curse under your breath. But there's no one around to hear. The world is still asleep, and your job is to feed it. Historically, bakers were often up before any other worker in town. This wasn't just out of dedication, it was necessity. Medieval towns didn't have refrigeration, preservatives, or even an understanding of airtight. Bread had to be made fresh every day. You don't just wake up early, you wake up when others are still dreaming of feasting. And if you're thinking, surely they had some way of easing into this. Nope, no coffee, no music. Not even the luxury of complaining on Instagram. Just the scrape of shovel against stone and the soft hiss of the rising flame. You drag a wooden tub near the hearth, filling it with flour, water, and the faintly fermented lump of yesterday's starter. It smells sharp, almost like beer left out too long, but this, my friend, is your most valuable asset. This gloppy lump of wild yeast is the reason your dough will rise instead of becoming medieval hardtack. Most medieval bakers didn't fully understand yeast. Of course, the word itself wasn't common. Instead, they called it balm or simply mother. And without microscopes or a germ theory of disease, they relied on consistency and intuition. You, meanwhile, rely on your nose. If it smells off like fish or mildew, you throw it out. Still, even experienced bakers sometimes got it wrong. Historians still argue whether the average baker truly understood the role of airborne yeast or just thought the dough blessed itself overnight. Either way, you scrape it into the mix with care. The water is lukewarm, not because you're fancy, but because the cold water makes the dough crack and warm water makes it too soupy. You stir it slowly with a wooden paddle that's older than you, then roll up your sleeves and plunge your hands into the heavy, sticky mess. And now, you need dot your hands, press, stretch, fold, again, over and over. It's a rhythm that would put most modern workout classes to shame. You twist your back a little to work out a knot and try to ignore the way your fingers are already going numb. The dough resists like it has something to prove. Outside, the sky is still black though. You know it'll start bleeding pink soon. For now, the only light is from your fire and the faint glow of oil lamps in the distance. You sigh. You haven't even shaped the loaves yet, and your arms already feel like boiled noodles. Bread may be the staff of life, but it sure doesn't. Bake Itself, a joke you've heard before, flickers through your head. A baker's work is never done until it's eaten. You mutter it to no one, and it makes you smile anyway. Now you take the dough, lump by lump, and set it on the long, wooden board known as a peel. It'll rest here while you build up the fire. Later, you'll form the loaves. Right now, you just let the dough breathe. You lean on the flour barrel for a moment, letting the warmth of the fire kiss your face. It's going to be a long morning, you know that. You also know there's no stopping now. You stretch your back with a groan, hands dusted in flour, and glance at the rising dough. It's starting to puff up slowly, like a sleepy cat curling on a windowsill. But while the dough relaxes, you have no such luxury. There's a fire to tend, and it's not exactly a push-button affair. The oven squats in the corner like a stone beast. It's domed, soot-stained, and hungry. You grab an armful of firewood, most of it dry, some of it questionably damp-hand, begin stacking it near the oven mouth. The cold seeps through the soles of your shoes, which are more like stiff leather, socks, than anything truly protective. The stone floor is unforgiving. It always is. You reach for your fire iron and start coaxing the flames to life. You need the oven to be hot, blistering hot, but there's no thermostat here. You judge by intuition the color of the stone inside, and whether your eyelashes singe when you peek in too close. Fun fact, medieval bakers didn't always own the oven. In many villages, the oven was communal or controlled by a local lord. If you were lucky enough to own your own, you guarded it like treasure. But most of the time, you paid to use it one coin, a chunk of your profits, or even a few loaves per week. Historians still argue whether these fees were fair business or just feudal extortion. Either way, today you're the one tending it. You rake the embers forward, watching as flames curl greedily around the fresh logs. The heat radiates out, and you step back instinctively. The oven will need at least an hour to reach the right temperature. In the meantime, you sweep yesterday's ash from the floor, careful not to inhale too much. Medieval air quality, let's just say your lungs, probably have the same texture as your bread crust. You wipe your brow with a flour-covered sleeve and catch your reflection in the dull pewter plate hanging near the door. You look like a ghost pail, with flour smudged with soot, hair sticking up in rebellious tufts. Dignified, no, but effective. Hopefully, outside, there's a faint stir. First sign that the world is waking up. A cart creaks by, its wheels rattling over cobblestones. Someone curses quietly as they trip in the dark. You smile. Misery loves company. Back inside, the warmth from the oven finally fills the bakery. You check the dough again, pressing a finger gently into one lump. It springs back like a polite refusal. Not ready yet. That's fine. You've got time. You use a bit of that time to oil the baking tray's heavy slabs of metal, slightly warped from years of heat. You rub them down with lard saved from last week's market, wrinkling your nose at the smell. It's not bad, exactly. Just ... present. You think back to the flour itself. Most days it's decent coarse, a bit gritty, but usable. Today, you're not so sure. There were rumors of weevils in the last shipment. You try not to think about that. You didn't see any ... yet. But you remember old Nan's advice. If it crawls, just bake it well and call it protein. You're pretty sure she was joking. Mostly, your stomach rumbles, reminding you that you haven't eaten. You break off a crust of yesterday's leftover bread and chew while standing. It's dry and dense like eating the heel of a boot, but it keeps you upright. That's all it needs to do. Now comes the flour check. You plunge a hand into the sack again, lifting a handful to your nose. Smells fine. No sour temps, no mildew. You sift some onto the workbench, dusting the surface like a winter frost. It settles into every crack and groove, painting the wooden board ghost white. You retrieve the dough. It's puffier, now less defiant, more willing to be molded. You divide it by eye, your fingers cutting invisible lines like a magician with doughy cards. A big loaf for the reeve, 2 smaller ones for market, 1 squat bun for the widow down the lane. She can't chew well, so you always make hers a little softer. And then, for the wealthier folk, the fine loaves. These use bolted flour sifted through cloth to remove husks and coarse bits. More labor, less fiber. But it's paler, and pale bread is fashionable. Some say it's cleaner. Others just like flaunting their stomach ulcers like badges of class. You remember the old law carved into a wooden plaque above the door. He who bakes bread light in weight shall be punished by pillory. It's not just moral judgment, it's legal. Bread was the cornerstone of every meal. Cheat someone on their loaf, and you could end up with your ears nailed to a post. Literally, to avoid that. You weigh each lump with a hanging scale that creaks like a dying crow. Close enough. You nudge a little more into the merchant's portion just to be safe. No one likes to be shorted, least of all someone with friends on the town council. Now, one last check on the fire. You shove aside the glowing coals and toss a handful of dry bran onto the oven floor. If it blackens too fast, it's too hot. If it just sits there, like a bored teenager, it's too cold. Today, it sizzles and turns golden brown. Perfect. You grab the long wooden peel and test its grip. You're about to start baking, and with that, the real fun begins. You wipe your palms on your apron again. At this point, you're not sure if it's helping or just redistributing the flour into more creative places. The dough is soft and warm now, resting in neat rows like plump little pillows awaiting their trial by fire. And now, it's time to knead again. Yes, again, because the first knead was just to get it mixed. Now, it's about structure, stretching the gluten, building the web that'll trap steam and give the bread its signature. Chew. You press down with the heels of your hands, fold the dough over, rotate it, press again. It's a hypnotic rhythm, like a lullaby for your muscles. Lullabies also made your wrists feel like they were snapping in half. You can't help but chuckle to yourself. Modern bakers with their stand mixers and dough hooks have it easy. You've got aching fingers, a splinter in your thumb, and a mental note to never challenge a monk to an arm wrestling match. They probably bake in silence while contemplating the sins of soggy bottoms. As the dough shapes up, you begin forming the loaves. Round for the villagers, oval for the merchants, long and braided for the baker's guild head who insists on presentation. You take special care with his loaf, not because you like him, he once accused you of watering down your flour with sawdust, but because he inspects bread, like a hawk searching for prey. Now comes one of the strangest rituals of the morning. Marking the loaves. It's not just for fun, though you do sometimes enjoy making them smiley-faced on holy days. In most medieval towns, laws required bakers to stamp or score their bread. It was a way of identifying who baked what, especially if someone got sick or just wanted to complain that their loaf was the size of a squirrel. Your tool of choice is a wooden stamp, carved with your initials in reverse. You press it gently into each raw loaf, the impression crisp and unmistakable. Sometimes, instead of letters, bakers used symbols, a sheaf of wheat, a simple cross, or even a tiny sword for the particularly dramatic. The point was clear: this bread came from you, and if it was bad, you'd answer for it. Some historians believe these stamps also served religious purposes, invoking blessings over the bread before it was baked. Others argue it was just good bookkeeping, the truth, probably a bit of both. After all, you're never too tired to hedge your bets with a little divine insurance. You pause to admire your neat rows. For a brief moment, the bakery looks ... peaceful, like a painting, if paintings came with the smell of scorched flour and aching feet. Then you glance at the clock, by which you mean the sun hasn't even risen, yet Dan snapped back to work. The oven is ready. The dough is ready. You are somewhat ready. You dust the peel with coarse bran and begin the delicate dance of loading the loaves. You slide the flat blade under the dough, lift, and gently nudge each one into the gaping oven mouth. It's tricky, one wrong tilt and the dough flops like a dead pigeon. But you've done this 1,000 times. Muscle memory takes over. Inside the oven, the loaves begin to puff. You can't see it yet, but you can feel it. The air thickens, the smell shifts. Warm yeast, earthy crust, the faintest whisper of burning wood. It's magic, but slow magic. You don't rush it. There's a trick to spacing the loaves too close, and they fuse into a mutant bread beast. Too far, and you waste heat. You eye the placement with practiced judgment, stepping back occasionally to squint and adjust. It's an art form, really, one with surprisingly high stakes. Now you wait, but not idly, of course. You still have more dough rising for the next round. A baker's work doesn't stop at one batch. You clean your board, flick old crumbs into the ash bin, and start preparing a smaller batch of rolls. A customer requested them yesterday, a merchant's wife, probably trying to impress someone. At lunch, she wanted delicate buns with a hint of honey. You don't have honey, so you'll brush them with watered-down mead and hope for the best. Creative problem solving, the true mark of a medieval artisan. While shaping the rolls, your mind wanders. You think of your neighbor, old Bertram, who swears his grandmother once baked a loaf so dense it cracked a stone floor. You suspect he's exaggerating, but then again, you've made a few loaves that could double as trebuchet ammo. So maybe he's onto something. The scent of baking bread now fills the room, swelling like a blanket of comfort. It seeps into your hair, your skin, your clothes. Later, when you walk home, people will know you've been working, not by your tired eyes, but by your smell. You crouch and peer into the oven, careful not to let the heat singe your eyebrows. The loaves are crusting over, no blistered and golden, with dark flecks from the fire. One has split slightly, revealing a glimpse of soft crumb inside. Perfect. Still, you give them a few more minutes. Patience is a virtue. Impatience, on the other hand, is how you get yelled at by the village reeve for underbaked centers. As you wait, you take a moment to stretch. Your shoulders crack. your knees pop, and your neck audibly protests. You're not old, not yet, but baking takes a toll. You've got flour in places flour has no right to be. The oven gives off a wave of heat that feels like a hug from a dragon. You grab the peel again, ready for the final step removal. You work swiftly, pulling the loaves out one by one, setting them on the cooling racks with a gentle thunk. Each loaf sings a little tune as it hits the wood, a soft crackle, like it's sighing in relief. And just like that, your first batch is done. Steaming, golden, branded, legal, and hopefully delicious. One down. Dozens more to go. The scent is now overwhelming, but in a good way. Bread, when fresh from a wood-fired oven, doesn't just smell good. It inhabits the room, curling into corners and nestling in your clothes like a comforting spirit. You lean against the wall for a moment and just breathe it in. But your break lasts only seconds, because now comes the complicated part, sorting the loaves by who gets what. And let's be clear, this isn't just about who paid more. No, in a medieval village, bread distribution is practically its own political drama. You glance at the parchment list nailed to the beam by the door. It's a little curled, singed at one corner, and written in a mixture of Latin and chicken scratch. At the top, of course, is the manor lord. His order is precise. For large manchet loaves, pale and fine, wrapped in cloth and delivered by hand. Beneath that, the tithes bread owed to the parish church. And below that, you finally get to the locals, whose preferences range from whatever's cheapest to do you have anything with raisins. You pull the Lord's loaves aside, first inspecting them like you're preparing jewels for a king, to pale, rejected. Slight crack in the crust. Try again. You choose the best of the batch and wrap them in linen that smells faintly of lavender. You hate how much care you put into this part, but you also know what happens if you don't. If the manor lord finds his loaves too dark, too dense, or, God forbid, short in weight, you risk a fine, or worse, a summons to the bread assize. Yes, that's a real thing. A literal court where bakers could be dragged before a magistrate for cheating customers or producing unwholesome loaves. Historians still argue whether these courts were actually effective justice or just another excuse to publicly humiliate people in flowery clothing. But either way, you don't want to find out firsthand. So you choose the most flawless loaves and pack them with quiet resentment. Next, you turn to the tithes bread given to the church. There's a little more flexibility here, as long as it looks respectable. Still, you know the priest has an uncanny knack for noticing when a crust is too hard or a center slightly raw. He never complains directly, of course. He just works it into his Sunday sermon, and lo, as the bread of life must be pure and risen, so too should our earthly offerings not be flat and underbaked. Subtle, Father, very subtle. You chuckle to yourself as you sort the rest. For the peasants, the bread is simpler, coarser flour, darker crust, but heartier. These loaves are real workhorses, designed to survive a few days in a larder and still be chewable after soaking in stew. You always make a few extras. Someone will come knocking with an empty hand and a hopeful look. There's also something oddly satisfying about the peasant loaves. They're rough, a little cracked, and often uneven, but they feel honest. You run your fingers over one now, still warm, and imagine the family that'll tear into it tonight around their hearth. No ceremony, no judgment, just bread doing what bread was meant to do. Then there's the awkward category, the short waits. Ah yes, the loaves that, despite your best efforts, came out a few ounces to light. Maybe the flour was off. Maybe the dough didn't rise enough. Maybe you were too distracted thinking about whether the widow at the market was flirting with you. Yesterday, whatever the cause, short-weight loaves are a legal liability. In many towns, bakers were required to keep them separate and sell them. At a discounter risk punishment, you stack them quietly on the shame shelf, wondering if anyone will notice. They probably will. Bread is currency here, and everyone counts every crumb. You sigh and pull the remaining dough toward you. Another round to shape, this time for the noon batch. You work quickly now, hands moving without thought. Roll, cut, weigh, shape, mark. The rhythm has returned, familiar and hypnotic. As you work, your mind drifts to a recent dispute you overheard at the town square. Two bakers were arguing about loaf sizing standards. One insisted on weighing raw dough. The other argued for baked. Wait. They nearly came to blows with their peels before the reeve intervened. It might sound petty, but bread size really was a serious matter. With so much of the population relying on bread as their main caloric intake, sometimes up to 80% of their diet undercutting weight was more than a petty scam. It was stealing dinner. You glance again at your scale and make a quick adjustment to a loaf. Just a little more. Better safe than pilloried. And about that pillory, yes, it was real. If caught selling short loaves, you could be locked in a wooden frame in the village square, your offense shouted by the town crier. Behold, the baker who cheats the belly. Children would throw stale crusts. Adults might offer helpful advice through gappy smiles. You'd be lucky to come out with only your pride bruised. So, yeah, you add that extra ounce, with the next batch resting. You return to the already baked loaves and begin organizing them in wicker baskets. You line each one with cloth and arrange the loaves with care. This is not just about food. It's about status. Bread is seen, smelled, shared. You want it to look its best. You glance outside again. The sky is soft grey Nausenrise, smudging the horizon with orange. You hear footsteps in the lane, the distant bleat of a goat, the squeak of a cart axle. The village is waking. Soon they'll come for their bread. You sit for just a second on the flour barrel, elbows on knees, and let your eyelids droop. Just a second. You've earned it. But then a rap on the door makes you jump. It's starting. You groan quietly and rise from the flour barrel, knees creaking like an old door hinge. The knocking at the door grows more insistent now. Quick little taps that suggest either urgency or someone whose hands are too cold for patience. You dust off your hands, tug open the bolt, and brace yourself for the daily parade. Outside stands a boy barefoot, freckled, with a mop of hay-colored hair and a basket that's clearly seen better days. He says nothing, just shoves the basket toward you like a soldier delivering bad news. You nod, take it, and fill it with 2 round loaves, slightly warm, there for his master, the reeve. Of course, you hand it back without a word, and the boy vanishes into the mist. And just like that, the bread rush begins. They come in a steady stream: farmers, servants, old women with scarves tied tight around their heads. Some bring payment in coin, others in barter. A wedge of hard cheese, a clutch of eggs, or once memorably, a small squirrel, still twitching. You decline that one. You keep the line moving with as much efficiency as a one-person operation can manage. You know your customers, and they know you. Old Marta wants her loaf with the thicker crust. Edwin insists on one without cracks, or he'll see visions again. You don't ask. You just hand him a smooth one. Each transaction is brief, but familiar. These are the people who keep your bakery afloat, not the manor lord or the smug merchant, but the quiet crowd who knows you're here before dawn and appreciates your work, even if they show it in grumbles. A younger girl approaches, carrying a pouch that jingles softly. She's from the apothecary's house and requests the fine loaves, the ones you wrapped carefully earlier. As you retrieve them, she glances around the shop with wide eyes, taking in the heat, the crusted oven, the baskets of steaming bread. You really get up this early? She asks, barely above a whisper. You grin. Bread doesn't bake itself. She nods solemnly and leaves, as if you've just revealed a sacred truth. It's not long before you're down to the last few loaves from the first batch. You sigh and stretch again, grabbing another sack of flour. Time to prepare the second run. Now, while you're working the next dough, let's talk about the ovens again, those monstrous fire-breathing domes at the heart of every bakery. Medieval bread ovens were serious structures, usually built from stone and clay, with a thick domed roof to trap heat. They didn't have doors as we know them today, just wooden planks or iron sheets propped across the opening, often sealed with wet rags or ash slurry to keep the heat in. You can still feel the oven's breath on the back of your neck to gauge the temperature. You toss in a handful of flour and watch how it burns. Too fast, still too hot, barely browns, not hot enough, just right. You're in business. Some bakers even claimed to listen to the oven judging readiness by the way it hissed or popped. Historians still argue whether these folk methods were reliable science or just clever guesswork honed by years of repetition. You've been burned enough times to trust your ears. Once the oven was deemed ready, bakers often scraped out the hot embers before loading the dough, letting the residual heat bake the bread. But not always. Some left embers to one side and baked beside them. It depended on the type of bread, the mood of the baker, and probably the alignment of the moon, if you asked old Bertram. You finish mixing the second dough, your hands red from the effort, knuckles dusted white. You shape a few more rolls, a few more round loaves, and one ridiculously long loaf you're baking for the tavern, apparently. They're having a feast tonight. You place them carefully on the board to rise and glance again at the fire. Still strong. You add a log anyway. It's a dance always, balancing heat, timing, humidity. You often joke that you're part baker, part blacksmith, part weatherman. As the dough rests, you tackle another chore, cleaning. Not your favorite part. You grab the stiff brush and start scrubbing yesterday's ash from the corners of the oven. Ash gets everywhere, under your nails, in your ears, somehow even in your bread, no matter how careful you are. You mutter under your breath and sweep it into a tin pail, coughing as the dust rises. While scrubbing, your thoughts wander to the village bread regulations. Ah, yes, the assize of bread and a la royale decree dating back to the 13th century. It set strict standards for the size and price of loaves. The logic was sound. Bread was a necessity, and bakers were expected to keep it honest. Problem was, grain prices fluctuated. Constantly droughts, floods, poor harvests. But prices for loaves, fixed, which meant your margins could vanish overnight. One bad season and bakers were either bankrupt or branded cheats. Sometimes both. And yet here you are, still baking, still standing, still hoping the flour lasts through the week. The second batch is ready. You begin loading the loaves again, arms aching, but fingers now moving with automatic grace. Into the fire they go row after row, each one hissing slightly as it meets the hot stone. The scent changes again, deepens. The earlier batch smelled like comfort. This one smells like accomplishment. The bell in the village square rings. It's not for you, but you mark the time in your head. Mid-morning already. You've been up for nearly 7 hours. Outside, the street is bustling. You catch glimpses through the open door. The cooper hammering staves, a child chasing a chicken, the priest inspecting apples with his usual frown. You stay in your bakery, of course. Your world is flour and heat and quiet triumphs. And as the second batch begins to brown, you let yourself imagine lunch. Maybe a crusty heel dipped in onion stew. Maybe that last sliver of cheese hiding behind the grain sack. Luxuries both, but well earned. You pulled the second batch of loaves from the oven with practiced care. The peel slides under each one with a whisper, the crusts crackling as they hit the cool air. There's something almost ceremonial about the final reveal, the transformation, from doughy promise to golden reality. You arrange them neatly on the rack and lean in to listen. Yes, listen. Bread sings when it's fresh from the oven's soft crackles and tiny snaps as the crust contracts and the steam inside finds its way out. It's like applause from the bread itself. Or maybe that's just what sleep deprivation does. To your imagination, now comes an unexpected but critical step, identifying each loaf. In this village, like many others, loaves are legally marked, not just to show off your craft, but to protect yourself. If anyone falls ill, complains, or dares to say your loaf was too light, the mark says, yes, that was mine. Let's discuss. You've already stamped the raw dough with your initials, but you double-check now, inspecting each loaf like a jeweler appraising stones. Some bakers got creative with their stampstiny animals, biblical symbols, even family crests. Your own mark is simple, a looped cross inside a circle. It's easy to carve, easy to spot, and hard to forge. In some towns, the bread mark system was strictly enforced. If someone died after eating a bad loaf, and that did happen more often than anyone liked to admit, the town reeve would go knocking. The baker's mark was as good as a signature in a courtroom. Historians still debate whether the mark system reduced fraud, but most agree it made bakers very paranoid. You certainly are. You glance over your shoulder at the corner shelf, where your emergency loaf sits. That's the one you bake with extra care, extra weight, and extra prayers. If you ever have to appear before the bread assize, that's the loaf you present. It's never sold. It's insurance. Of course, most days, no one inspects your bread. Most days, you simply go about your work unnoticed. But the fear of the assize lingers like smoke in your lungs. You've seen bakers punished. You remember the one who tried to stretch his flour by adding chalk. He thought it would go unnoticed. It did not. They marched him through the square, tied him to the pillory, and let the children throw stale crusts at him. For a week afterward, no one touched his shop even after he washed the floor with vinegar and tears. You shake the memory loose and return to your current batch. You tap the bottoms of a few loaves with your knuckles. They sound hello a good. Sin, that's how you know they're done. Your fingers are numb from heat, but you barely notice anymore. Next, you prepare the bread for delivery. You load the loaves into baskets again, separating by size and type. You tie linen over the top of the finer ones to keep out flies and eyes. Some folks get competitive over who gets the best crust. You've learned to hide your masterpieces, unless asked. You slip on your cloak and step outside with the first basket. The chill is gone now, replaced by a warming breeze and the earthy smell of village life. You step carefully, avoiding puddles, livestock and toddlers on your way to the manor house. The manor is a short walk uphill. Along the way you pass the cooper, still hammering barrels, the miller arguing about flour weights again, and two hens chasing something that might be edible, possibly not. You climb the steps to the manor kitchen, where the steward waits, nose already twitching. He doesn't say hello, he just lifts the cloth, inspects a loaf, gives the faintest nod, and grunts something about payment later. You don't mind, he's predictable. On your way back down, a child peeks from behind the stable door and whispers, "Did you bring the burned one?" You smile and reach into your pocket for a crust dark and chewy, baked too long but perfect for gnawing. The boy grabs it and vanishes again. You like this part. The quiet bartering, the small kindnesses. The burned crust doesn't feed your ledger, but it feeds your soul. Back at the bakery, you begin preparing for the midday buyers' laborers who want bread with whatever pottage they're having. You also set aside loaves for a few widows, a blind man down by the tannery, and the old woman who brings you dried apples in exchange for heels and crumbs. You don't do it for charity. Not exactly. You just know hunger when you see it, and then you take a moment, just one to savor the silence before the next wave. You sip from a tin cup of water, barely cool, and lean against the wall. Your arms ache, your feet throb, and your apron looks like you lost a flour fight. But the bakery is warm, full, alive, and so are you. You're back at your workbench, rolling dough between your palms, when a familiar face peers in through the open bakery door. It's Ulrich, the steward's nephew, with that pinched look he always wears, like someone permanently disappointed by the weather. He steps inside without waiting to be invited, brushing flour off a bench before sitting like he owns the place. Lord's wife says her loaf was too brown. He says flatly, like you're being accused of a crime against bread and nobility. You raise an eyebrow and don't respond immediately, mostly because your mouth is full of the heel from a half-burned loaf, your baker's share, as you call it. You chew slowly, defiantly. He continues, "She wants lighter crusts, less chew." You swallow. Tell her to eat clouds. He doesn't laugh. He never does. Truth is, nobility in the Middle Ages had a very particular relationship with bread, while the lower classes prized hearty, dark loaves that could survive a week in a damp cellar. Nobles preferred their bread pale, soft, and light, made with sifted flour that had to be passed through cloth up to 5 times. This not only wasted half the grain, but cost triple in labor. The result? A snowy white bread that practically disintegrated. When you looked at it wrong, historians still argue whether this preference came from genuine taste or from the sheer novelty of being able to waste grain. Either way, it's your job to deliver what they expect, or at least fake it convincingly. You sigh, nod at Ulrich, and gesture at the sack of the finest flour you own. You'll make her loaf again. You always do. Once he leaves, you take a moment to consider the pecking order of breadjes. There really was a bread hierarchy. At the top was Manchet the Fine, white bread served to nobles. Soft, nearly crustless, and basically flavorless, except for pride. Next came cheat bread, still relatively light, made with flour, bolted once or twice. This was merchant fare, respectable, eaten with meat, cheese, and judgment. Then came Ravel. Bread, brown bread, mash bread darker, denser, and full of fiber. These were your customers' loaves. Real bread. Bread that worked for a living. You like making the hearty stuff more. It behaves better. It doesn't fall apart if you blink too hard. And it makes your bakery smell like someone actually lives. There, as you prepare the manchette dough, you handle it with a kind of resentful reverence. You know this loaf isn't about flavor. It's about status. You knead it gently, almost tenderly, as though it were a sleeping cat you didn't want to wake. The flour is fine, nearly silky, and it sticks to your skin like powdered smugness. You place it near the hearth to rise close enough for warmth, but not so close that it gets sweaty. Bread is picky like that. Then you turn your attention to the real surprise of the morning. An unexpected customer. The bakery door creaks again. And this time it's Tilda, the widow who lives near the mill pond. She's rarely out this early. She steps in, glancing around like she's not quite sure she belongs. You smile and wipe your hands. Tilda, you want your usual. She hesitates. No, actually, I was wondering, could I bake something? Here, you blink. That's not a usual request. In fact, women like Tilda aren't technically supposed to bake for the market. Town charters often restricted baking rights to licensed male bakers, part of the guild system. But of course, reality was murkier. In homes and on farms, women baked constantly for their families, their neighbors, sometimes for quiet trade. But when it came to selling publicly, they had to be cautious. Some dressed as men, others partnered with male relatives who officially sold their goods. A few, like Tilda, simply asked politely and hoped no one noticed. Historians still debate how widespread women's baking really was. Official records are sparse, but the bread was everywhere. So clearly, someone was making it. You glance around your shop. The second batch is cooling, the fire's holding steady, and you have enough dough for another round. You nod. You can use the corner bench. Just don't tell Alric. She grins like a child and shuffles to the back, unwrapping a small bundle from her apron. Inside is a lump of dough already mixed rough, speckled with herbs and smelling faintly of garlic. You don't ask what it is. You just hand her a bowl of oil and watch as she shapes it with more confidence than you expected. She hums as she works. It's a song you don't recognize, old, lilting, from somewhere farther north. The dough obeys her hands, curling into spirals and knots. Not a style you've seen before, but beautiful in its way. You keep working too, side by side, silent except for the crackle of the fire and the creak of boards underfoot. This is a good moment. When her loaves are ready, you help her slide them into the oven. She nods, thanks you, and takes a seat near the door, waiting patiently. You return to your tasks, cleaning the table, checking your ledger, reknotting the sack of flour. And all the while, the bakery fills with a new scent, sharper, richer, something different. Tilda watches the oven like it's a sunrise. When her loaves come out, she wraps them quickly, thanks you again, and disappears down the lane before anyone can see. You smile. Sometimes bread is more than bread. You settle back into your rhythm: flour, water, knead, rest, bake, repeat. It's comforting in its way. Like brushing the same stretch of canvas again and again, knowing you'll never be finished, but also never bored. That's when it happens. You Lift the cloth off your latest bowl of dough and frown. It hasn't risen, not even a little. You poke it. It's dense, stubborn, heavy as a stone. In soup, you sniff. There's a faint sourness, not the nice tang of mature starter, but something more aggressive, almost metallic. Not good. You sigh deeply and roll your eyes at the ceiling. This again does sometimes, despite your best efforts. The yeast just doesn't cooperate. Maybe the air was too cold. Maybe your starter was off. Maybe the flour had a mood. Bread making is chemistry. Yes, but it's also negotiation. And right now, the yeast is staging a silent protest. You grab a fresh bowl and pull what's left of your starter from its clay jar. You stir it. It bubbles. That's a good sign. But as you tilt the jar, something catches your eye. A streak of odd color near the rim. Slightly orange, slightly fuzzy. You've grown dot. Mold. You scrape off the top layer, hoping the bottom is still salvageable. This is what bakers in the Middle Ages did. No fancy microscopes. No sterile kitchens. Just eyes, nose, and guesswork. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. Historians still argue whether early bakers truly understood fermentation or just prayed to Saint Honor, patron of bakers, and hoped for the best. You pour out the questionable parts and stretch what remains with fresh flour and water, whispering a quiet prayer under your breath. You're not a religious type, but after losing 2 batches in 1 week last summer, you're not taking chances, while the new mix sits hopefully near the warmth of the hearth. You return to your ruined dough. You could throw it out, or ... You remember old Marta's trick. She once told you that if your dough goes wrong, you can still salvage it by baking it into rusk sard. Twice baked slices meant to last for weeks. Soldiers ate them. Monks practically lived on them. No one likes rusks, but in lean seasons, they could mean the difference between survival and starvation. So, you knead the stubborn dough one more time and form it into long, flat loaves. You bake them once just enough to set the crust, then slice them, return them to the oven, and let them dry into edible bricks. They'll keep for months, maybe years. You'll stack them in the back room and sell them to travelers or anyone with a strong jaw and low standards. Not glamorous, but practical. While they crisp, you begin prepping new dough. Again, this time the mix feels better, softer, smoother. It stretches with a little resistance, like it's waking up from a nap instead of refusing to leave bed. You sigh in relief and let it rest. This is what people don't understand about baking. It's not just work, it's resilience. You fail, you adjust, you start over. Again and again, quietly, without applause. You check on the rusks. They're hardening nicely. The bakery now smells of roasted flour and faint regret. Suddenly, there's a knock at the back door. That's unusual. You wipe your hands and open it cautiously. A man stands there dressed in brown robes, face shadowed under a hood. A monk. From the look of him, maybe from the nearby priory. "Peace," he says, bowing slightly. "Do you sell spelt bread?" You blink. "Spelt? I might. Why?" "We have a brother, suffering from visions. The physician suspects wheat may be the cause." "Ah." You nod slowly. "Ergot." He nod back grimly. Ergot, the uninvited guest of the medieval grain world. A fungus that grows on rye and other cereals in damp conditions. It looks like dark kernels, easy to miss. Eat enough, and you're in for a treat. Nausea, spasms, hallucinations, sometimes death. Historians believe it may have caused entire village outbreaks, even sparked witchcraft panics. You've seen ergot once. A dusty shipment of rye last year came in with black streaks like ash. You dumped it into the river without a second thought. You glance at your sacks. No rye today. Mostly wheat and a bit of barley. I have no spelt, you say carefully, but I can bake a loaf with oat and barley. Low risk. The monk nods. Tomorrow, then, you promise it and shut the door. As you return to your bench, you glance at the rusks and feel a small shiver. Bread can nourish, bread can kill. It all depends on the grain, the hands, the fire and the luck. Your new batch is rising beautifully now, pillowy full of life. You cover it with cloth and sit near the hearth, letting the heat wash over you. Outside, you hear bells from the priory midday prayer echoing over rooftops. You're not praying, but you do murmur a small thanks to the yeast for showing up. You glance again at the rising dough. This one's going to be good. The dough is rising now, visibly puffing under its cloth like a well-fed cat curled up beside the hearth. You grin, not to why Duve learned not to gloat too early. Bread is fickle. One draft, one distraction, and your dough might sulk into a flat mess out of spite. You glance over at the rusks, cooling now on the side table. They've hardened perfectly golden, dry, solid as bricks. You knock one gently against the wood, and it makes a dull toke, like a tiny drum. You'll wrap them in muslin later and send them to the tavern keeper, who always needs something shelf-stable. For his traveling guests, one less batch wasted now. With a rare moment of calm between loaves, you do something radical. You sit, not on the flour barrel, not on the stairs. You actually sit on the bench by the window and let your shoulders drop. Outside, the lane is full of movement. Carts clatter past. A dog sniffs its way across the square. A goose honks indignantly at a child who got too close. Sunlight slants in through the glassless window, filtered by the flour-dusted cloth you hung to keep flies out. And as you sit there, you do something even rarer. You listen. Inside the bakery, it's warm and hushed. You can hear the quiet settling of loaves on the rack, the soft creak of the beam above your head, the tick-tick of your fingernail brushing idly against the bench. It's peaceful. You almost forget how tired you are. But then, through the window, you hear voices. Two villagers are chatting near the well. Their words float in like breadcrumbs on a breeze. Heard about the baker's mark, didn't you? Which one? Old John. They say he copied someone's stamp. You raise your eyebrows. Bread forgery. Now that's a scandal. The idea of someone counterfeiting a loaf's mark might sound absurd today, but in the Middle Ages, it was a serious crime. If a bad loaf made someone sick or violated weight laws, and your mark was on it, you were liable. If someone else made it, some bakers, desperate or dishonest, forged the marks of more respected rivals, hoping to coast on their reputation. Historians still argue how common bread forgery was, but the consequences were real. Pillory, fines, even exile in extreme cases. You've always guarded your stamp like a prized possession kept. It wrapped in linen in your flour chest. You rise from your bench and check the drawer. Just in case. Still there, a small, simple lute. Cross carved into worn wood, dark with age and your own skin oils. You feel a flicker of relief, and then shake your head. Paranoia isn't just for noblemen and millers. It visits bakers to dot back at your bench. Your dough is ready. You uncover it, press a finger into the top, and watch the dent slowly fill. Back in, perfect. You begin dividing it, your hands moving with an easy, automatic grace. Your muscle memory is more reliable than your memory at this point. You shape the loaves, some large, some small, a few oval-shaped ones for the butcher who likes to slice them long ways for stews. You dust them with flour and score the tops with a quick slash. Not your full stamp, just a small decorative touch. It helps the crust open in a controlled way, and besides, it looks nice. Then you start the oven preparation again. Coals to the side, a few new logs to nudge the heat back up, and the test. A wisp of bran scattered across the stone floor. It darkens just enough. You load the loaves. They go in one by one, the dough hissing quietly as it meets the radiant heat. You close the oven mouth and seal it with a slab of wood and a damp cloth dot. Now, you wait. But not idly. You clean again, sweep, organize. Re-roll your flour sacks to keep mice out. You check the ledgers who still owes you for last week's batch, who bartered instead of paid, who brought you a moldy onion and promised the rest next time. You pause at one entry. May 9th, Widow C. 2 small loaves. No payment. You leave it. You'll mark it settled if she brings back that wild herb she promised. Honestly, her stories alone are sometimes worth the bread. You glance at the cooling rusks again, and consider setting one aside for yourself. Not because you want to eat it more, because it feels like insurance. Like saving a biscuit for the end of a long walk. While the loaves bake, you notice something strange. A faint scent in the air, not from your oven, but outside, earthy, wet. You lean out the window, rain. A slow drizzle has begun, darkening the dust of the road and dotting the shoulders of passers-by. You smile. Rain means slower crowds, fewer demands. And tomorrow, it'll mean moister air in the bakery. Better rise. Rain also brings a certain quiet to the village. A hush, fewer carts, fewer squabbles, more time for people to duck into alehouses and shops, or for you to rest, maybe. Back at the oven, the crust is beginning to split, revealing that soft golden belly inside. You can't help but admire it. All that fussing, fretting, restarting. Here's the reward. You don't say anything, you just listen to the oven breathe and wait for the bread to sing. The loaves are nearly ready now. You slide open the oven door with the practiced gentleness of someone lifting a sleeping baby, not out of sentiment, but because if one of those loaves topples, it's going to land crust first into hot ash. And no one wants ash loaf. Again, you guide the peel beneath each one, nudging it carefully, testing the weight, the crust, the color. Some are deeper brown, their edges curling slightly where the oven was hottest. Others, closer to the mouth, are lighter golden and soft. Together, they make a beautiful batch, uneven but honest, a little like life. You stack them on the racks to cool, spacing them out so the steam doesn't make them soggy. That's one thing they don't teach in songs about bakers. You can ruin an entire day's work just by stacking bread too close, too fast. Moisture is the silent saboteur of your trade. You lean against the wall for a moment, letting the heat settle into your skin and the smell wrap around you like a warm cloak. There's something in the smell of fresh bread that silences even the most restless thoughts, even when you're exhausted, even when your back feels like it's been run over by a cartwheel. That smell reminds you it's worth it. A soft rap on the door. Again, but this time it's not the steward or the merchants. Bratty's son, it's Gunter. Gunter, the charcoal burner. Towering, broad-shouldered, covered in soot from beard to boot, and somehow always grinning like he knows a secret no one else does. He steps inside, bringing the smell of smoke and damp leaves with him. Heard you had a batch go sour, he says, pointing to the rusks stacked neatly on the side table. You nod. One batch. Not the worst I've done, he chuckles. Remember the week the flower turned pink? You wince. Don't remind me. Historians today believe that strange flower colors, like pink or green, were often signs of fungal contamination. Sometimes harmless, sometimes deadly. But in the village, it just became a folk tale. The week the flower turned pink is still something parents whisper to kids when they waste food. Gunter points to a rusk. Mind if I take a few? The boys at the charcoal kiln are chewing on roots again. You hand him a sack and fill it with the best of the batch. They'll need to soak them in broth, you warn. They'll just dunk them in beer and pretend it's stew. You both laugh, and Gunter lumbers off, sack slung over one shoulder, leaving a trail of wood smoke behind him. You return to your bench, where a new batch of dough is rising slowly. It's a quieter time of day now the rush has passed. Outside, the drizzle has become a steady patter. The village moves more slowly. The bakery, usually the heart of chaos, feels like a sanctuary. You take this moment to check the corners of the room. Every baker knows the bakery has secret habits. Mice chew the flour sacks if you don't tie them tight. Damp creeps up the back wall if you don't light the hearth often enough. And the banneton baskets, that's your next project. You've been meaning to reline them with new cloth. That you inspect the baskets. You notice a few strands of wheat stuck to the bottom of one. And not just any wheat. This one's purple tinged, with a long tail. Rare. You pluck it out and turn it in your hand. It reminds you of an old rumor you once heard, that some bakers, in far-off towns, added crushed herbs or flowers to their flour knot. For a flavor, but to dye the bread. Purple for feasts, gold for weddings, red for holy days. No one in your village would stand for it, of course. Too risky, too unfamiliar. But the idea sticks with you like warm honey on fingertips. You set the grain aside and make a mental note. Maybe one day, maybe when the reeve isn't watching so closely. You check your ledger again, adding a new note. Gunter -1 sack rusks, return favor, charcoal. Bartering is a second language here. You may not be rich in coin, but you're rich in bread. In this place, that often counts for more. As you work, your thoughts drift again to bread lore. Specifically, the little-known tradition of the Usai's loaf. If grain prices rose too high, the town could declare an emergency rate of fixed price for bread, regardless of your cost. It could bankrupt a baker overnight. But if you refused, to bake fines, accusations, the public oven might be reassigned. Bakers were expected to absorb the risk. Historians still debate whether this protected the poor or punished the working class. You have your opinion. The truth is, you've baked through years like that. Tight margins, sleepless nights, quiet, anger, but never once did you stop. Because someone needs to feed the village. And whether they remember your name or not, they remember your bread. You lift the next ball of dough, now soft and pliable, and begin shaping it. You press your thumb into the center, letting the air sigh out gently. You're not just feeding people, you're leaving fingerprints on history, one crust at a time. The rain thickens. You hum to yourself. Nothing fancy, just a quiet tune passed down from a baker before you. One day, someone else will hum it too. You finish shaping the last round of dough and line it up on the floured bench to rest. Your hands are sticky, your apron stiff, and your shoulders are beginning to hum with the kind of ache that promises they'll be yelling at you tomorrow. But still, you're smiling. You reach for a cloth to drape over the loaves when the door creaks open again in this time. It's not a regular customer. It's Edith. Her hair's tied up in a scarf. Her boots are caked in mud, and her shawl looks like it's soaked through. She's not from this part of the village. She lives near the woods, just on the edge of where the trees start to whisper. She only comes into town when she has to, usually to trade mushrooms or berries, or odd bits of wax and herbs that no one quite knows what to do with. Today, she's holding something under her arm. You bake for the holy days, don't you? She asks, not waiting for pleasantries. You nod slowly. If someone orders it, why? She holds up what she's carrying. A bunch of dried herbs, bundled tightly with string and still damp from the rain. For a crust, she says. For the bread of the saints. Ah, of course. Holy days, fasting days, celebration days. In the Middle Ages, bread wasn't just food, it was ritual. Different days called for different loaves, some shaped like crosses, some braided, some stuffed with dried fruit or stamped with holy symbols, and some, like the ones Edith's asking about, laced with herbs, said to cleanse the humors. You take the bundle and sniff it. Sage, marjoram, maybe even some wild hyssop. It smells like a forest floor on a good day. I can make something, you say. Not for sale though, she nods. Never is. I'll be back after dusk. And she's gone. You glance down at the herbs and shake your head. You weren't planning on an experimental loaf today, but the truth is, these are your favorite moments. When bread becomes something more than survival. When it reaches upward toward celebration, remembrance, or hope. You set the herbs aside for now and turn back to the resting loaves. You're about to load the oven when someone else steps in, a bit of a surprise. It's Reynard the candle maker, always smelling of beeswax and soot, always looking like he's just remembered something important, only to forget it again a moment later. Today, he's holding a twisted loaf, half-eaten, wrapped in cloth. Problem? You ask, trying not to sound defensive. He sets it down and pulls back the fabric. It's good, he says. Too good, you blink. That's not what you were expecting. My wife thinks I bought it from the bishop's baker, he explains. She accused me of sneaking into town and spending coin. You stifle a laugh. So, what do you want me to do? He shrugs. Can you make one that looks a little worse next time? You lose it just for a moment. A single, honest laugh. I'll burn one side for you, you promise. Perfect, he says, grinning, and leaves with the rest of the loaf under his arm. You shake your head. Too good. That's one you'll remember. You return to your oven and check the heat. Still strong, still steady. You begin sliding in the new batch of loaves, spacing them with care. The first few hit the stone with a quiet thump, and you can already hear the hiss of moisture meeting fire. The smell shifts, again like a tide-turning dot, as the loaves bake. You think about crusts. A crust says more than most people realize. Pale, thin crust tells you it was made with fine flour, baked quickly in a hot oven. Rich bread, fancy, probably for someone with coin and opinions. A dark, thick crust. That's village bread. Cracked, chewy, honest. It tells you the flour wasn't perfect, that the oven wasn't entirely consistent, that the person baking it had bigger concerns than color. You prefer dark crusts. They feel real. Some people brush their loaves with egg wash. You don't, not often. You save that for holy days. when the crust needs to shine like gold. On ordinary days, a little water will do, or nothing at all. Historians still argue whether medieval bakers focused more on flavor or appearance. The truth is, it depended on who you were baking for and whether they'd pay you more for a pretty loaf or a filling one. You're brought out of your thoughts by the sound of your bench creaking. Someone's sat down. You turn and it's Tilda. Again, this time, she's holding a loaf of her own, smaller, rounder, dusted with something reddish. Spiced flour, she says, for winter markets. She offers you a slice. You break it open. It's surprisingly soft. The spice is faint, but warm nutmeg, maybe. You nod and take a bite. It's good. You should sell it. You say, I'd need a stamp. She replies, you look over at your bread mark. You pick it up, press it into your palm, then you glance at Tilda. You could use mine, you say. She tilts her head. And what if it goes wrong? You smile. Then I'll blame the yeast. She laughs. You both sit in quiet for a while. The rain softens outside. The bread bakes. The world turns. And in this tiny bakery, for a few minutes, everything is warm. The scent of baking bread once again envelopes the room, rising with the steam from the oven and curling around the rafters like a sleepy ghost. You and Tilda sit in companionable silence, letting the warmth settle into your bones and the hush of the afternoon stretch out like softened dough. Eventually, she nods toward the oven. Those smell ready. You rise, groaning a little as your knees protest another hour, another dozen tiny rebellions from your body. You reach for the peel, slipping it under the first loaf and easing it out. It's perfect. Golden brown, small cracks in the crust revealing a soft interior. The slashes across the top opened just so. Tilda whistles low. You've got magic. In those hands, you scoff. No magic, just calluses. One by one, you retrieve the loaves, each one humming its quiet, crackling tune as it hits the cooling rack. Tilda helps you line them up, her hands deft despite her age. You don't ask where she learned to bake like this. Everyone has stories they don't tell unless they're needing something. As the last of the loaves cool, she nods once and slips out into the lane with her own bundle. No goodbyes, just a quiet see you at the feast, and she's gone. You return to your bench, take off your apron, and notice just how much flour is clinging to your arms, like snow refusing to melt. You pat yourself down, more out of habit than hope. The door creaks again. This time, it's the boy from the priory. Not the monk from before. This one is younger, with wild hair and a look of someone who's had far too much responsibility handed to him too quickly. He holds out a cloth-wrapped bundle. Brother Giles said to bring this. Payment for the loaf. You take it and unwrap it. Inside is a small jar of preserved quince. Sweet, sticky, precious. You nod. He'll have his bread in the morning. The boy grins and dashes off, cloak flapping like a sail. You set the jar on your shelf, beside the cheese rinds, the dried herbs, and the bit of wax you've been saving to seal your ledger. It catches the light, amber and glowing. It's a simple thing, but it feels like treasure. You finally allow yourself to citrally sit. Not perch, not lean, sit. You rest your elbows on your knees and look at the room. There's a kind of mess that means things are alive. Your bakery is full of that kind of mess. You look at the bread cooling on the rack, the half-folded cloths, the bowl of herbs from Edith's still waiting for your holy loaf experiment. There are crumbs on the floor, a bit of ash by the oven, a streak of something, maybe egg, maybe hope on the table, and it's all perfect. You think again about the bread you'll make for Edith, a crust laced with herbs, a braided shape, maybe, something that tells a story. Bread used to do that before. It was just food. It was a message. It told you where someone was from, what they believed, what season it was. Whether they were mourning or celebrating, bread carried meaning. You want to bring that back, even just for one loaf. The oven has cooled just a little, but it's still warm enough. You gather some flour, a bit of barley, a pinch of salt. You mix the herbs in, rubbing them first between your fingers to release their oils. The scent rises. Immediately, earthy, green, sharp. Like the woods after rain, you shape the dough slowly, with care. Not rushed, not routine. You braid it into a simple 3-strand twist and mark it with your knife. A circle in the center, rays radiating out. Like a sun. You don't know what it means. It just feels right. You let it rest, and when it's ready, you bake it. No distractions, no customers, just you and the loaf. While it bakes, you sit again and finally allow your body to feel tired. Your hands throb. Your lower back is a battlefield. Your eyelids are heavy, but your heart, surprisingly light. You think about all the bread you've made today. Some perfect, some salvaged, some shared, some secret. Each one different, each one necessary. You think about the stories you've heard, the laughter shared, the favors exchanged. You think about the quiet resilience in every need, every scrape of dough from the bowl, every puff of flour that coats your lashes and makes you look prematurely old. And you realize something. Bakers don't just make bread. They keep time, not in hours and minutes, but in meals, in seasons, in fasts and feasts, in births and burials. Every loaf is a mark on the calendar of a village that will forget your name before it, forgets the taste of your crust. You rise to check the loaf. The crust is deep brown now, flecked with green, the braid risen and proud. You place it on the rack and let it cool. You'll give it to Edith tomorrow, before the church bells ring. For now, you sit back down, close your eyes, and let the warmth of the oven breathe across your face. You've earned this moment. The holy loaf cools on the rack, its herbal aroma still curling through the warm air of the bakery like an offering. You watch the crust set minute by minutes, more fissures blooming across the surface like age lines on a smiling face. The scent is richer than you expected. Woodsy, sharp, calming. You've never baked anything quite like it, but you know you will again. You wrap it in cloth and tuck it gently onto the shelf beside the finer loaves, like placing a book between volumes of poetry. Then, for the first time in hours, you notice the sun is beginning to dip behind the western trees. It's late. You glance at the wallet, the hook where your coat hangs, still dusted with flour from last week, and consider heading home. But there's one last delivery to make. The tavern. You pack the requested loaves in a wicker basket and set out into the evening light. The lane is quieter now, damp and golden with that low sun that makes even muddy puddles look like melted bronze. The occasional villager passes by, many nod, some smile. A few still eye you like you've got secrets baked into your crusts. You let them dot at the tavern door. The air is thick with the smell of roasting onions and burnt ale. You duck your head and step inside. The innkeeper, a stout man with a bald head and hands like loaves themselves, waves you over. Is it the long loaves? He grins. You nod and pass the basket over. He pulls one out, sniffs it, taps the bottom. with approval. You know, he says, there's been talk of expanding. Another tavern, down by the river. Might need bread there too. You nod, trying to seem casual. Inside, you're already calculating flour, distance, delivery times. You say nothing. Just hand him the ledger and let him scrawl a note you'll try to decipher later. Back at the bakery, twilight settles over the rooftops. The fire in the oven is nearly out, embers glowing like eyes half-lidded in sleep. You begin to clean. This is the part no one sees. The scraping of the boards, the washing of the bowls, the knocking of ash from your boots. You move quietly, methodically, each movement familiar. Wipe, fold, sweep, stack. You think about your day, not just the bread, but the people. The faces that came and went, the small kindnesses, the stranger's secrets, the hidden pain behind a tight smile. You carry all of it, the way dough carries. Air, invisibly, but undeniably. There's something sacred about this hour. You're alone, but not lonely. Surrounded by the echoes of laughter, footsteps, whispered requests, and the ever-present crackle of the hearth that's now beginning to go dark. You remember the loaf you saved, the one with the cracked crust and lopsided rise that no one else would want. You retrieve it from the shelf and tear it open, still warm inside, if only just. You spread a bit of quince preserve from the jar the monk brought and sit by the open window. Outside, the rain has stopped. You listen to the sound of drips falling. From eaves, the last bird calls of the day, and somewhere far off, the low toll of the church bell announcing the Compline prayer, the day's final thanks. You take a bite. The crust crackles. The preserve is sweet, tart, unfamiliar. It tastes like work, like patience, like hope. And you realize this quiet moment, this bite, this breath's yours. You finish the loaf slowly, like reading the last page of a good story. Then you rise, stretch, and walk the bakery one last time. You check the locks, secure the sacks, bank the coals. The room darkens, shadow by shadow. Before leaving, you pause at the doorway. You turn and whisper, "Sleep well, old place." And then you step into the night. You step out into the village lane, the sky now deepening into a navy blue canvas streaked with faint traces of orange. The wind is gentle, cooler than it was earlier, and carries the scent of damp earth, chimney smoke, and the faintest whiff of rosemary from the tavern stew. Your feet ache. Your arms feel like over-kneaded dough, but your mind clearer than it's been all day. You walk home slowly. The street lamps, if you can call them, dar, little more than oil bowls mounted on wood, casting flickering halos of light that shimmer across puddles. From one window, you hear a baby crying. From another, someone tuning a fiddle poorly. A dog barks. Someone laughs. It's a living village. Breathing, resting. You reach your cottage, just a squat little thing near the edge of the mill lane, and step inside. It smells of last week's herbs, your laundry still drying on the back line, and the faint ghost of burned barley from a pot you forgot to watch. Home, you toss your flour-stiffened coat onto the peg, unlace your boots, and lower yourself onto the bench by the hearth with a sigh that feels 2 centuries old. There's not much to eat, just the rest of the quince from the priory and a knob of bread. From the corner of today's batch, but it's enough. More than enough. You chew in silence, watching the coals in your small fireplace glow and fade, like tiny, sleepy eyes. The cottage creaks around you as it settles. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, but you've wedged them tight. No surprise gusts tonight, and yet you don't feel done. Not quite so. You pull out your ledger, not the accounts book. The other one, the smaller, rougher one, where you jot down notes, ideas, odd dreams about bread, animals, or braided loaves shaped like dragons. You open it to a blank page and begin scribbling. New herbs tildes mix, possible use for holy loaves. Edith's crust held. Check how she dries her herbs. Idea, 3-tiered loaf for market display. Decorative but edible. Loaf that tells time slits deepen as bread rises. Ridiculous. Try anyway. It's not neat. It's not even legible to anyone else. But it's yours. You pause over the last line. Loaf that tells time. Silly. Impractical. But isn't that half the fun? Your thoughts drift back to something Gunter said last week after biting into a particularly toothy rusk. You don't just make bread, he grunted. You make stories people can eat. You liked that, and it's true, in a way. Every loaf you bake is a chapter. Every customer, a character. Every cracked crust, a line in the margin. The bakery isn't just a business. It's a library of fleeting, edible moments. You close the book and stretch your legs. The sky outside is almost black now. The fire is low, the wind quiet. You feel that pulse, low insistent of your body begging for sleep. You rise, brush the crumbs off your lap, and shuffle to the cot in the corner. Still draped in a scratchy wool blanket, you keep forgetting to replace Dot as you lie down. You pull the blanket up to your chin and stare at the beams above your head, and you wonder, how many more loaves will you make? How many sunrises will you watch through flower-covered windows? How many quiet miracles will you knead into dough, hoping someone notices if they don't know what they're tasting? You don't have answers, but tomorrow is another 3 a.m. And the world will need bread. So you close your eyes and dream of crusts. You wake before the rooster crows, not because of an alarm, but because your body knows. It always knows. Even before your eyes open, your nose twitches. The scent of damp stone, of cooling coals, of flour still clinging to your skin. You shift beneath the blanket and listen. No sounds from outside yet. The village is holding its breath, suspended in that eerie stillness before dawn. You swing your legs over the side of the cot, wincing slightly as your heels touch the cold floor. Another day, another loaf, another rising. You wash your face in the basin by the window. The water is cold and bites like truth. You blink away sleep and pull on your baking tunic still dusty from yesterday. You could wear a fresh one, but it feels wrong, as if you're trying to impress the dough. No, the old one is just right. Faded, familiar, honest Dot. Outside, the darkness is still thick, but in the east there's a bruised purple smudge where the sky is beginning to change. You walk the path to your bakery, basket under your arm, half full of herbs, an onion, and the rest of that quince jar tucked like treasure beneath a cloth. The air smells of wet leaves and chimney smoke. The only sound is the soft crunch of your boots on the frost-tipped road. You pass the cooper's house quiet, the well silent. Even the tavern cat, usually prowling by now, is nowhere to be seen. It feels like the world is pausing for you, waiting for your fire to start again. You reach the bakery and open the door. The smell hits you immediately. Yesterday's crusts, old ash, lingering warmth. You breathe it in like a welcome, like a benediction. You light the hearth again, Flint. Steel, spark, breath. The flame catches slowly, reluctantly, but it comes. You add a log. The wood hisses. You begin again. You lift the lid of your flour chest, run your fingers through the top layer. It's cool, slightly damp, but good. You measure it by feel, by weight, by sound. You add water, pinch in salt, and start to mix. Your hands remember the rhythm even before your mind catches up. Push, fold, turn. Over and over. Outside, the sky turns blue. Inside, you knead. And as the dough rises, so does the village. The first cart rattles by. The tavern door creaks open. A child shouts. A woman calls for her dog. The cooper begins hammering, but none of it rushes you, because you've already started, before them all. As always, you glance at the marked shelf where Tilda's loaf once sat, gone now, eaten, likely, or shared with someone who needed it. You think about that, about how bread leaves, no trace but the memory of fullness. And then you laugh softly, under your breath, because you realize something else. You don't just make bread, you make morning, you make routine, and rhythm, and comfort. You make something people hold in their hands, and forget came from yours, and that is enough. You shape the dough into loaves, press your mark deep into their soft tops, and set them to rest. The fire crackles, the door is still closed, but soon it will open, and the day will begin. Again, asterisk, and now, as the bakery settles once more into its gentle rhythm, your breath begins to slow. The fire burns lower. The loaves rest peacefully, rising in silence. The world beyond the window turns steadily, predictably. Soft winds rustle through thatched roofs. A cart creaks in the far distance. But here it is quiet. You ease into the stillness, letting the warmth of the hearth soak through the soles of your feet, imagining the soft crackle of crusts cooling, the tender weight of dough beneath your hands, the satisfaction of knowing you've made something again that will nourish, however simply, however briefly. The tools are clean now. The flour sacks are sealed. Your apron is folded, and the peel rests against the wall, waiting for the next round. There's nothing more to fix, nothing more to prove. And though you know tomorrow you'll rise again, long before the sun, long before the world stirs you, also know there is peace in that repetition, a calm, a purpose. So for now, rest. Let the scent of baked bread follow you like a warm blanket. Let the embers fade behind your eyes. Let the weight of this quiet, little life cradle you gently toward sleep. You've done enough. You are enough. The loaves will wait good night.